Using the design kit, I've designed a table leg. I actually made 3 variations of the same leg. I like the foot, so I kept them the same, but by using different cutters, I've made variations of the top portion here. This is the one that I like, and this is the one we'll use in this demonstration. It will require 3 router bits. For this cut here and here, it'll be bit number 3934. That bit is also used here at the top, and then we'll use bit number 3952 at this point right here. And of course, to turn it round or to mill it square or whatever we decide to do with the rest of it will be bit number 2704, the surface planing bit. If you look closely at the scale, this end right here is at 0. You'll notice that the end of the foot is up here at 2 inches. The reason that I've done this is so that when I come in and cut this off and turn these parts, I won't run the router bit into the screws that mount the index hub. Now I've taken a part that's 20 inches long and it's 2 inches by 2 inches. And I've cut the corners off on my table saw because I'm going to turn this round. Using bit number 2704, I set the plunge depth. I'm going to come in from the back side till a 1/2 inch offset, rotating the handle counterclockwise. I'm going to mill the stock round, cutting from the headstock towards the tailstock. While the router's all set up for this operation, I'm going to take this one out and put another blank in here and repeat this operation. I'll make several of them at the same time. Now we'll take bit number 3952, move it off to the side, and we'll plunge it down till the shoulder of the bit is just resting on the surface of the wood, and that'll be our plunge depth. Looking at the plans, we can see that the center of this cut is right here at 15 inches from the end of the stock. With the plunge set to the proper depth, we'll simply slide the carriage up to 15 inches and lock it onto the X-axis screw to hold it in position and make our cut. Once again, we repeat this setup on all of the parts, except for the square one at the end. We'll handle this one a little bit differently. To machine the square piece, we have replaced the handle with the index gear and have engaged the indexing pin. Now we're going to take and need to flatten this and have it synchronized to our indexing. So what we can do by using the double locking collar here on the spindle shaft, we can take the part and simply rotate it until it is square and then lock it down in place. The router depth is still set to the same depth, and we're going to cut this at 15 inches the same way. This time we're going to open the split nut and just let the router slide back and forth as we make this cut, and we'll plunge down deeper and deeper for each cut, making it multiple passes. For the second detail here, we used the bit number 3934, positioning at 16.5 inches on the x-axis, using the same technique to mill this detail as we did the first one. You can see that when we use this bit number 3934 to mill this detail at the foot, we're going to plunge down 1/4 of an inch from the surface of the wood. To cut the foot, we're going to position the router at 4.5 inches on the x-axis, and then we'll reset the plunge depth 1/4 inch that we need. Again, we'll use a set of feeler gauges set for 1/4 of an inch and simply put that between the plunge bar and the stop. Now it's ready to make this cut. Now we'll move the router bit down to 3.5 inches and make the next cut. Now we're ready to set up for tapering. By referring to this chart in your manual, you can quickly set the adjustable bed for the desired taper. We know that the tapered section for our leg is 10 inches in length. We also know that it's going to taper from 2 inches down to 1 inch, which is 1 inch difference. So we simply follow this row over until we get to 1 inch, or in this case 0.99 is the closest number. And then follow this column down until you get right here. This number will tell you how far to adjust the bed. This one says we need to drop the tailstock end 4 inches. This chart is for the model 900. If you've got a 10-inch taper and we follow this over to 1 inch, or 0.97 is the closest number, and follow that down, we would set the model 900 to a 2 3/4 inch difference. So we're going to take the 2704, put that in the machine, in the router, and just plunge the bit down until it rests on the top of the wood, right here at the largest diameter at this end. And we'll lock our plunge bar and make our cut. For the square part, we've replaced the handle with the indexing gear, and we're simply going to plane all 4 sides on the taper. Now that the taper is complete in this section, we'll want to continue that on this side of the bead. We'll want to set a stop so that it cuts back to here. We don't want to run the router bit into the screws that hold that index hub on the end. When milling this end on the square part, we're going to cut back and forth across the stock this way, and we'll need to make this in multiple plunge depths. So we'll bring it up here, touch it, and then just plunge down a little bit more, no more than 1/8 of an inch, and continue to make cuts until it's finished. With the basic design complete, we're ready to start adding details. On this first sample, we're going to cut a rope design into this tapered section. We're going to use a 1-inch diameter rope molding bit, and we set the gears for a 4-inch pitch because we're going to do 4 starts. Notice that the bed is still set on the same angle or the same taper that we used to cut this tapered section here. And we've set a stop in the x-axis so that we don't run the router bit into the foot. With the plunge depth already set, we're ready to go. And there's our first start. Now we'll simply take the router bit out of any one of these positions. It really doesn't matter. We'll move it back 1 inch and we'll make our second cut. First I'll synchronize it, slide it back 1 inch and cut the next pass. We could leave this in just like it is, but I'm going to bring that cutter up to this point and just run it around the circumference to kind of tie off that rope. Well, the first one turned out pretty nice. On the second one, we'll cut a spiral as well, but we'll do a diamond pattern, so we'll be cutting in both directions. We're only going to do it on this top section, so I set a stop here at 11 inches. Now I'm using a V-groove bit, and we've set the pitch for 6 inches by using the F-size drive gear. There's our first spiral pass. Now we'll take the router bit and synchronize with this cut. We'll move it back again 1 inch and make our second cut. This time we're going to make 6 starts. That completes the 6 starts turning to the left hand. Now we'll cut 6 to the right to complete the diamond pattern. I've changed over to the right hand drive now, and we simply repeat the process, cutting 6 more starts. For this part, instead of turning a round taper on this section here, we've indexed it, gone every third holes, which will give us 8 equally spaced sides.
These are 12 ways to follow the timeline. So this next part, we're going to do something really different. It takes the standard approach that might be often 2 times in the work part. We're using the website, using the technology to click. So we're very, very attention to how this practice work is moving dynamic. We want to follow that tape on the side. So when you have the template, that's going to be a profile in the template. Let's use the players in the top. Let's just use the spindle. Set that as parallel to the start. Now we're using the 2 screw plates to reduce 2 moments. So one of the is the key to the timeline. I'm going to press that through that and bring it into the touches tool. Now we want to line it to move the hand about 105 inches from the edge of the stock. So what we're going to do is we'll simply put a spacer and we'll give it a button in the folder. This is 100,000. The spindle and the contact. Lock that in place. Now that will allow the water to move over the technique here is to simply slide the bottle and put a pressure button as the as we come from the telephone to the contact. The website level now is simply take the surface part of it and put it on the floor and the senior surface part. On this part, we're just going to explain the square at the end. What I want to do is not the radius from the corner. So we don't have to do that in the beginning. We'll simply get to the bottom row and make a cut. And go to the second one, and the third one, and so on as we go through the next of these. First describes a square with the corners rounded. Otherwise, you take a rail and go to the front with his head. And then the mouse fingers are wrapped in the corner. Just to make a palm to your hand, just to see that way. You may have noticed that many times of drawing, the index and the same thing. But it's not how we get to cut these voices. When a section starts at 17 and a half and 19 and a quarter, and then I somewhere along the line to 0. And then the last round, I'm going to say, I'll do a half inch, and maybe go to the bottom of the side out and do it here. If this thing is spring, that is a piece of cake. The spring spot is a little bit different. You take it on a rail, and start it and kind of bump it up against the round frame. Of course, you'll have a gap there. So what we want to do is to keep flapping your feet and then get the knife to do it. I've put a bit of a 27 by 4, which is a 730 by 3 right over here. We'll turn that down until it's touching the wood. Now we have to set the press down because then we can cut this. We go 75,000 to the HP. We're making that to test that thing to make the flat a little bit wider. While you're fixing the trucks, we just turn the cut. Look at this up close. As you want to put a pencil at it. The flat goes from this edge here to this edge right there. Now we can measure that with a set by calipers. Now this is right, and we don't look that time. We're going to have just a couple of processes of 0.75, which is 3/4 inch wider. That's right. It's a little bit like where it is. So we spend that to make the next cut at 1 degrees. Now we've got the two flats, but we can go back to the machine and mark it and have it concealed that flat. On this part, we're going to cut 3 deadpost parts. We'll start by making it flat just like we did on the other part. So just get 1 4, so just turn the wood down, and then we'll set the cutting to the end for 75,000 of inch. And then we'll cut this flat. So it's great for positions where we go ahead and turn the hose, and now we're going to slightly spaced flats. something that we got to put it into a chicken. Using a 3/8 diameter 2-foot straight cut, and take the point of the outside just a little less than half of an inch. We'll cut a little bit at a time. Great goods of print was something to be changed and they let the stamps are made free exactly where we want it. And then take the delta and you don't need to set the time. You're going to take one top touches of red and then we'll do a 1/4 inch. So I said we'll cut about a 1/2 inch. Usually the sheet is longer than a 1/2 inch from the end. Now this is made out of the long panels, so you've got to now we have the greenery machine that shows us back to down or square. If you want to cut a joint with the head or the center or cut dovetail cuts, all this is done by the next and the other. After you the green cut in exactly the same way, we use a 50 square, we use a 2-foot straight cutter and cut it again. The last step is to cut detail. We'll use the same cut and then the 2-foot straight cutter. We'll set this at 1 3/4 of an inch. And just cut down the next position. And we'll set the first step so that it doesn't get the other way to the triangle. And this time, we'll cut from the near side into the center to get the shade. Cut the center of the area, you have a nice square in there. Now let's just cut the surface of the possibilities. These are all based on 1 centimeter.